Hi, it's Cara Brown, and this is Watercolor Conversations. It's a place where I share my love of watercolor and my seeking, my teaching, my discoveries, the connections I see, and just in general what it's like to be alive at this time here on planet Earth. I hope that this meets a part of you that's longing to be met. Thanks for being here. Hello. So last time we looked at painting the light. In this episode, we're shifting our attention to what surrounds our subjects and how soft edges can create depth and orient the viewers of our art's focus. Representational art is often described in terms of its parts, especially foreground and background, or subject and background, the thing or things that are being portrayed and their surroundings. We most often pay attention to the thing we are painting. Its thingness is most compelling. It's what drew us to paint it. It's not uncommon for an artist in my groups to paint the flower or the apple or a loved one's face and then ask my opinion about what to do with the background. It's a good question. What indeed? How you handle the surroundings of your art's subjects contributes greatly to the ultimate outcome of your art. In botanical illustration, for example, nothing surrounds the subjects. The paper is left blank white, which keeps the observing eye solely on the plant that the artist painted. In the process of coming upon the art making that I'm here to do, I've been drawn to recreate the out-of-focus backgrounds that the camera captured in many of my reference images. When the subject of a painting has crisp edges and the background shapes have soft ones, a sense of depth comes through in the painting. Painting fuzzy backgrounds probably started with my just being quite literal and wanting to reproduce what the camera captured so that the focus would be on the subject, with everything else out of focus. I must have liked the way that it created a whole kind of environment. When we're painting from real life, it's tricky to keep our eyes from refocusing on the area around our subject, to keep our brains from automatically shifting focus. We can try to tune into our peripheral vision to take in what's around it and see that it's out of focus, but it's really hard to hold that. If we paint from photographs, the camera does this for us. It saves the visual information around our subjects in varying states of focus or blur. I sometimes collage multiple images together in Photoshop for my paintings. I can spend hours doing this. I've intentionally blurred the backgrounds of images that I've brought in that weren't there from the beginning, and it gives the same effect. Taking the field of view apart a bit, there can be more than just foreground and background. Sometimes there's a midground, which can be more in focus than the far distance, but not sharp like the subject. I found this when I painted myself lying on a stone wall in Croatia. There were at least 4 fields of view. The mainland of Croatia at the horizon, the coast of the island I was on in the mid-far distance, which was quite blurry. The pomegranate tree that was just below where the wall was had shapes that were soft. And then there was me and the stone of the wall in sharp focus. The ways of working with the paint that I use and teach, the techniques, I would say, are useful for more than just backgrounds. I also paint with soft edges on flower petals, really any place where you have some kind of a distinct shape that you want to have a soft edge. The actual painting of these soft edge shapes takes more than you might imagine. It's quite easy to put a lot of water on your paper and then loosely lay down the paint and just see what it does. You can watch it spread and flow as watery watercolor does. It's also straightforward to paint on dry paper, controlling edges and having the paint do just or pretty much just what you intend it to. It's another whole thing to paint relatively distinct shapes and have those edges be soft. The most frequent response that I have received when demonstrating what I do to make my fuzzy backgrounds is something like, "Wow, it's a lot of work." We want to be able to just whip out the background, either before or after we paint our chosen subject. The background seems secondary, less important, so we want to spend less time on it. If we do, though, we can be rewarded with a painting that's a lot more to say. In the soft edges of a fuzzy background, the pigment particles are not stacked up against a hard edge. They are graduated from most concentrated to no pigment at all in a small stretch of paper, maybe 1/8 of an inch or so, maybe a few millimeters. They can also be blended with other paint colors, making soft edges where the two passages of paint come together, where they join. When we paint like this, I'm attempting to, at least I hope for, a specific control how blurry the edges of the shapes are. I'm intently working with a relationship between the water, the paint, the brush, and the paper. When I think about the fact that the paint that we're working with is made up of particles and that these particles are suspended in water at various densities, it helps me visualize what I'm working with kind of in my mind. So with lots of water, it's very low density wash, relatively less water, giving a really thick layer of paint. And then there's the brush and how well the brush can move or not move these particles around. A snappy brush, one where if you rub it across your finger, the bristles of the brush, you kind of feel a snap. That's the kind of brush that you'll be able to, I almost call it I'm sculpting with the brush. You can move the pigment around on the paper. You can lift it up really easily. You can really easily soften an edge. A soft brush where it feels sort of mushy and very soft, almost like fabric, like if it was a wet rag, that's not going to pick the paint up. It's not going to move it around nearly as much. The paper is so important when painting this way. I really encourage you to use 300-pound paper because there can be a lot of working with the surface of the paper and there can be a lot of water, and having that solid surface underneath your paint and brushes and water makes an enormous difference. Thin paper with all that going on just doesn't have the solid substance to really hold it. It will buckle and it will scuff. Lesser quality, inexpensive paper is even more challenging than good quality thin paper. I actually suggest that just to experience this, that you start by figuring out what it takes to make some fuzzy backgrounds that please you, and then try to do the same things on inexpensive paper that they call student grade, and you can get how challenging it is. It doesn't stick. You can't layer as readily. It's really, really challenging, and I find it a nightmare. There's a photography term that is going to come into play here because I see it a lot in the backgrounds of my photos that I work from. It's called bokeh, B-O-K-E-H. It's the Japanese word for blur. And what bokeh are round shapes that you will see kind of in the background. I'm picturing sort of a street scene with the wet streets and the shine, and you've got these circles of red and white and gold all around the subject. Those have to do with the limited depth of field of the camera. And I like reproducing them in my paintings. There's another kind of circles that you can find in your reference images. And these are not created by the camera. They're dappled light. That's where light comes sifting through the little tiny spaces in between, say, leaves or foliage. You see them on the ground, you see them on a building or a rock wall or something where the sun is shining through foliage. I have learned, and I find this kind of enchanting, that those circles are a reflection of the disk of the sun. And I discovered this because I noticed that they had the shape of a crescent and a half moon during an eclipse recently. I just thought that was absolutely incredible. So you can watch the progress of an eclipse by looking at dappled light. Who knew? I've been calling these shapes, whether they're bokeh or whether they're dappled light, sky holes. And I love to bring them into my paintings when I see anything like them in my reference images. They can be full of colors. They can be complete or incomplete circles. I find myself lifting in already painted paint to kind of make these circles happen just spontaneously, just on my own, just from my own imagination. They're fun. They're really a fun part of a fuzzy background. One time I was demonstrating how I paint these fuzzy backgrounds at Riley Street, our local art store. I was working on recreating an out-of-focus rosebud with the little leaflets that are around it. The painting also had lots and lots of water drops. As I was carefully softening the edges and sculpting the paint into shapes that I saw, someone asked me if I would paint a water drop. And I sort of paused and had this thought inside myself. I understand. Water drops seem tricky to paint. They're kind of sexy to watch someone paint a water drop. This voice also said, I'm quite certain there's lots of places online where you can see how to paint a water drop. But painting like this is a challenge. And if you'd like to be able to do this yourself, you might have me continue painting this rosebud. In addition to providing dimension, backgrounds can contribute greatly to telling another story. It's my intention, my hope, that my paintings do tell a story of sorts. They are not just a portrait of a subject, a flower, apricots, a puppy face. They are the revelation of a moment that I lived. And the background is very often a crucial part of this story. It helps place the subject somewhere in the world and reveal something about the light and the mood I experienced when I captured the image with my camera. So I think that backgrounds are very much worth considering and spending our time on. They're a great way to practice both the material and mental foundational pieces of learning to paint. We're working with the paint and the water with our brushes, and we're working with the shapes and watching the painting take shape, enduring the less than satisfying intermediate stages, practicing patience, and exercising our determination muscles so that we don't give up. One of the reasons I've been reluctant to demonstrate is just this. I think that people watching a demonstration expect to be wowed by the skills of an artist making magic in a few minutes, and that's not how these come together. So painting a fuzzy background as a demonstration is sort of an interesting experience for me. But it's how I've chosen to paint. It's how I've been called to do this, and it's got a lot of work. If you're so inclined, I suggest you give it a try and see what happens. In the next episode, we're going to build on this by looking directly at how we create the illusion of 3 dimensions in a 2-dimensional world. I hope to see you there. Happy painting.